Many philosophers over the years have tried to prove the existence of God, so there's a large number of arguments for this. In this video, we will quickly present and refute all of the major arguments for God that have been proposed so far. Everything has a cause, so there must be a first cause. The assumption that every event has a cause comes from our intuition and common experience. But there's a lot of stuff in cosmology and quantum physics that appears to violate human intuitions. Specifically, there are some things, such as virtual particles, that appear to pop in and out of existence for no apparent cause or reason. The Big Bang shows that the universe had a beginning. Actually, scientists nowadays see the Big Bang as an early stage of the universe, but not necessarily as the point where the universe began to exist from a previous point of non-existence. Also, scientists aren't saying that the universe just popped into existence from a state of absolute nothingness. The universe must have a cause. Even if we grant that, one could still postulate that the cause of the universe was natural or material in nature. In addition to that, there are cyclic models for the universe that don't require a cause or an actual beginning. The first cause must be a mind, because only a free agent can make an uncaused decision to create the universe. This is not so clear as it seems. Minds don't just make decisions in an uncaused way. The decisions they make are caused by a previous mental state. An eternal, timeless material thing would not be able to cause anything. The concept of timelessness is hard to imagine. I agree that if one imagines an eternal, timeless thing, then it seems like it would remain static and wouldn't cause anything. However, it seems to me that a timeless and eternal being would have the same problem. The act of creation implies a before and after creation, so it implies time. It's hard to see how a timeless being could decide to create anything. Paradoxes such as the Grim Reaper paradox or the Hilbert Hotel show why an infinite series cannot exist in reality. As philosopher Alex Malpass argued in his debate with William Lane Craig, these paradoxes involve some counterintuitive scenarios, but they don't reach the point of being actual logical contradictions, so it hasn't been truly proven that an infinite series cannot exist. The constants of nature are fine-tuned for life. The probability of this happening by chance is extremely small. Nobody is saying that there was a point where all the constants of nature were shuffled like a lottery and they just happened to land on these specific values by chance. It could be that these values depend on something more fundamental that we don't know yet. Just because you can imagine another number in an equation doesn't mean that the actual value of this physical parameter could have been any arbitrary number. God is the only viable explanation for why the constants of nature are fine-tuned for life. Actually, there are other possible explanations. For example, it could be that the wrong values in these constants leads to some kind of collapse that resets the universe. Another explanation is the multiverse hypothesis. There could be multiple universes with different physical constants. There is no evidence for other universes. This response misunderstands how the burden of proof works in this case. The fine-tuning argument claims that God is the only possible explanation for why the constants are what they are. In order to respond to that, one merely needs to propose another possible explanation for it. I don't need to provide additional evidence for the multiverse any more than you need to provide additional evidence for God. The existence of objective morality proves that God exists. The Euthyphro dilemma refutes the notion of morality being grounded in God. Is something good merely because God commands it is? Then morality is arbitrary and not truly objective. Or does God command something because that thing is good? Then there is an independent standard according to which an act is good or not, and this is not up to God to decide. God's own nature determines whether something is good or bad. This is just linguistic sleight of hand that does nothing to resolve the dilemma. One can simply ask, are virtues such as kindness good because they match God's nature, or is God's nature kind because kindness is a good thing? The problem remains. God is the greatest conceivable being. A being that exists is greater than a being that doesn't exist. Therefore, God exists. This argument implicitly defines God as existent. If it is true that existence is greater than non-existence, then to define God as the greatest conceivable being is to define him as existent. In addition to that, the same argument can be used to prove the existence of the greatest possible pizza. There is a possible God where God exists. Because God is a maximally great being, if he exists in a possible world, then he exists in all possible worlds. Our world is a possible world. Therefore, God exists. There is a way to show that this is absurd. One could define Mr. Cloner as a guy who creates clones of himself in every possible world. Because the concept doesn't involve any contradictions, it is logically possible. Therefore, there is a possible world where Mr. Cloner exists. And because he creates clones of himself in every possible world, it follows that he must have created a clone of himself in this world. So, Mr. Cloner must also exist in this world. In addition to that, Joe Schmidt has shown that this modal argument can be flipped to argue for the non-existence of God. Feel free to check this video for more. Just look at the world. Isn't it obvious that God exists? This is no different than ancient people pointing at lightnings and saying, "Isn't it obvious that they must be caused by Zeus?" It's just a God of the gaps argument. The high complexity of life means it must have been made by a designer. This designer would have to be even more complex because he would have to contain all this complex information in his mind. In addition to that, Darwin's theory of evolution provides a naturalistic explanation of how complex life forms can appear from less complex ones. The odds of life appearing from non-life are astronomically small. Most proposed calculations for this involve a lot of mistakes, such as assuming that there's a fixed number of proteins, with fixed sequences for each protein that are required for life. For a deep dive on this, check this article on Talk Origins. In addition to that, there's an insane number of planets in the universe, so there would have been innumerable trials over many millions of years. Someone I know was sick, then got preyed on, and she had an almost unexplainable recovery. This is based on a misunderstanding of statistics and probabilities. There are thousands of millions of humans on the planet, so events that are very unlikely actually happen every now and then. But the doctor said this was a miracle. How convenient is it that God heals some diseases, but truly impossible things, such as amputated limbs, have never been healed, ever? Near-death experiences and cases of demon possession prove that the supernatural exist. There are too many hoaxes and scammers out there. None of this stuff has been proven under controlled conditions, despite extensive investigation done by skeptics. People like James Randi have exposed over 1,000 hoaxes, and not a single case has been able to pass the high evidentiary bar required for these kind of claims. Thousands of people witnessed the sun dancing at Fatima. These people all gathered because they were expecting a miracle and were super eager to see one. And since when is one supposed to look directly at the sun anyway? The entire thing is just a gullible crowd getting a bit too carried away. Science can't explain consciousness. This is a God of the gaps argument. Consciousness is an emergent property of some complex biological systems. Just because we don't know how to explain it yet doesn't mean that it has to be a supernatural thing. Only a soul can explain why humans have things such as feelings, emotions, and self-awareness. If you ever had a dog, you would know that dogs also have emotions and self-awareness. So clearly, a soul is not necessary to explain any of this. Dogs also have souls and they all go to heaven. Christian doctrine doesn't generally postulate this, so this is an ad hoc solution. If dogs have souls, how about fish or bugs? How about bacteria or viruses? Where do you draw the line? God is necessary to ground the laws of logic. When atheists ask, "Can God make a stone so heavy that he can't lift it?" theists usually answer that this is impossible because it would be a logical contradiction. This shows that even God himself is governed by the laws of logic instead of being his establisher. Math must be grounded in God. To say that math must be grounded in God is to say that 1 + 1 = 2 because God made it this way, and that if God didn't exist, then 1 + 1 could be anything. But this is obviously ridiculous. If you believe in God and you are wrong, you don't lose anything. But if you don't believe and you're wrong, you will go to hell. It's not a 50-50 chance because there are many different religions, and you also need to be in the right one. Some Muslims say that Christians go to hell. In addition to that, religion has many rules that can make people unhappy, so it's not true that you don't stand to lose anything if you wrongly believe in God. My personal spiritual existence proves that Jesus is real. There are people from other religions that say the exact same thing. This doesn't prove anything.